Welcome back to the Play on Words podcast from Big City Readers. It's Miss Beth, and today we're talking about one of the, I would say, most dramatic and biggest decisions families face around elementary school, and it's kindergarten. And the drama is to redshirt or not to redshirt. And to join me, I've invited one of my friends and favorite guests we've had here on the podcast, Jon Arens, principal, parent, big city believer.
Big city believer,
Welcome.
yes.
Big city believer. How are you?
Good. I need to get that on a bumper sticker or something. Big city believer.
I don't know why. I never like write out a script for the podcast because you're probably like me and I'm like, I need to be able to shift and just flow. And if it's too structured, I can't do it.
Yeah, I actually was looking at bumper stickers today because I feel like I've gotten to the bumper sticker part of my parenting journey where I feel like I want people to know more information about me than they probably care about. So if you do make those bumper stickers, I'll probably take one.
Okay, before we jump in, I've got a fun little treat for my local Chicago listeners. My incredibly talented friends at A Little Photo Studio are offering $50 off a professional photo session when you use the code BCR50. And trust me, these are fun photos. I actually have a few that I've done at A Little Photo Studio hanging in my house. They are creative, they are different, and you will have fun at this shoot, I promise. This is an offer good through September 1st, so grab it now. If you've been thinking about family fall photos or even updating your headshots, this is your sign. I will link all of the info in the show notes. Go grab this offer right now.
Well, that's funny. I actually was just having my niece help me make a bucket list. And I was like, what are some things I could do? And she said, you could make like more Big City Readers merchandise could be on your bucket list. So maybe this is a sign. Okay, so you are not a stranger to this podcast because first of all, I think you might stick out because you are one of two men that have been on the podcast. So maybe that's why people are like, I remember the principal. Yeah.
Hold it down for the men.
Yeah. But also because you famously, I'll say famously, said on the podcast, you were like, I saw somebody, we talked about behavior charts before, and you said, no, there's no way, that's not legal. That's not ethical. There's no way a school would pass that. And people were like, oh, my school does. And you were like, that's a lie.
Yeah, that was surprise. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be surprising. There's not as much regulation around schools as people realize. It's a lot of local control mostly. So things do have a tendency to stall out and not get changed unless there's, someone pays for like a consultant to come in, or, there's a change of leadership at the top of a district or an organization where they're going to come in and change something. Every once in a while you see it with school boards, but even most school boards, I would say, are, much higher level than the building level things. So they wouldn't be, knowledgeable about a behavior chart or a specific type of behavior chart.
Right. I think that actually is an interesting point, is that people think schools are more regulated than they are. Like I've had parents be like, oh, I'm in this district. Do you know if they use the science of reading? I'm like, babe, classroom to classroom in a specific school is going to be different, not this district. I mean, they can be like in general, but there's just so much nuance.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a science of reading curriculum that's being implemented and have different staff in different units within a building, which happened in my school, where it just takes a while to train that and to get things off the ground. And so you might have certain teachers that are trained who are then in charge of training other teachers, or you could have a very specific rollout. It's not like a light switch. So some teachers come in with experience with different types of systems too. I mean, I think the what I heard recently is, I think the average turnover, maybe this was in Wisconsin, but the average turnover for a school is like 25 to 30% a year in terms of teachers. So you are going to have teachers that come in needing things or bringing things. So I do think that a lot of the science of reading push has been really good. I was really pleased with it from my perspective as an administrator, as a parent. I think it's definitely pushing things in the right direction, but it is definitely not a light switch. And there are districts right next to each other that are in totally different places, and a lot of it depends on the knowledge of the staff and the knowledge of the administration, and how what you're using already versus what you have to completely buy new. But things are definitely kicking into gear in Wisconsin, and I think nationally it's becoming a much more discussed topic, which is ultimately really good. I mean, I think that for a long time parents had no idea how reading worked, and I think you posted recently something about, like, do you remember learning to read? No one remembers learning to read. It's not like walking. It's not like I wouldn't compare it to talking, because obviously there's speech therapy is a thing, but and obviously there's physical therapy too, but it's not something that like it just happens. It does require explicit instruction and specific types of skills, and you're often way too far apart from it as a parent to remember how you learned how to read. So it's really hard for you to help your kids sometimes, because you don't remember your own journey through it, unless you are maybe in a specific reading intervention program or something like that you like remember the name of, or you really remember the teacher.
Or if you had a specific trauma around it, like I remember it because it was traumatizing to me.
Yeah. So there's not usually like, I would love to know the percentage of people that can remember learning to read. It's got to be 10-15%. I certainly don't.
And I've talked to so many parents who say, like, I don't remember these rules, but they make so much sense. I'm like, you probably didn't actually learn the rules that kids are learning now, because I definitely was whole language. And I know, because I remember the moment as an adult that it clicked for me. I mean, obviously I learned to read and I did well in school, but it didn't come naturally to me. It did not come easily to me. And I know that if I had been taught like the science of reading and phonics strategies and all these things, I know that I would have remembered that because I remember being in my 20s and being like, oh my gosh, because I know my brain and I know that I like to like look for ways to solve puzzles and problems. And so like it clicked to me finally that it's not just a mystery, that there's actually a method to the madness, because until then I was just like, I'm just not good at this.
Yeah. And there's I have lots of theories about kind of like pushing reading versus not pushing reading.
Yes.
All three of my kids are very different in how they've approached reading, and obviously I'm not a formally licensed reading teacher, but I was like 2 classes away from getting that license if I had wanted to. And I, help design reading intervention and support reading intervention and structure reading intervention programs as my job. And for my kids to now want to read with me at the beginning of their reading journey is very frustrating on the front end. And then I realized that, it didn't need to be me that was trying to teach them how to read, and learning to really trust the school and figure out the processes and get familiar with the things that you can do at your home parenting level. So there is some kind of like separation between like church and state in terms of like what the kids are learning at school versus, practicing those skills at home, and not associating their parent with, like explicit skill instruction is not a bad thing.
Agree. You said you're pleased with Wisconsin and where things are going. I have a lot of friends that teach in Wisconsin, behavior specialists or learning specialists or speech pathologists, and they all at different places have said like about the whole district getting letters trained, which is a really big science of reading approach. And it sounds like Wisconsin is as a whole is making a lot of shifts. Are they one of the states, do you know, that have banned 3Qing?
Yes. So there's a law in Wisconsin called Act 20, which was passed bipartisanly, which is amazing in Wisconsin because things do not happen that way in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It still hasn't been fully funded, which is kind of like the last hurdle, obviously an important hurdle, but the state, allocated or said, these are the curriculums that you can use. And then all the districts went through and trialed different ones. And especially in the last year, the awareness of just what the movement was going towards in terms of like phonics instruction and explicit instruction came a long way. I think it became something that was a real talking point. It was a part of every professional development update. It was constantly updated at staff meetings. People knew who were getting trained. People were aware of the companies that had been approved. People saw the boxes of curriculum coming in and out of the building. So I think that once those kind of tangible things happened, that was really when it started to take root. I think the year before was actually the year the law passed. And people were still like, I'll believe it when I'll see it, like things pass all the time and nothing ever happens. And then I think this year was like the real big year where it was, you had principals and district level people, especially like curriculum people were getting pulled into, pretty heavily recurring meetings discussing, what a personal reading plan looked like, which is what they call them in Wisconsin, and like the different facets and the different kind of things that had happened before grade 3, and were they retaining kids at grade 3, which is an option that they've left up to individual districts. But I think all in all, the law being passed and implemented, and obviously the funding piece is like the last big piece. But that I think that it's gone really well as a whole in the state. And I think that, I haven't heard a lot of parents that have had children on PRPs or personal reading plans that have been like really upset or confused by PRPs. And I think that the curriculum teams have done a good job of working with special education teams and special education leadership in navigating the like tough conversations between, like a PRP is not special education, a PRP, is this, and special education is this. And I think that conversation especially has gone really well. And I think that a large part of that is because they started talking to us, like the special ed people, probably like 18 months ago.
Okay.
When it first passed, I was kind of like, am I going to get invited to these meetings? Like, are you guys going to just like design this thing? Because we were all sitting there in the meetings and we were like, this really looks like special ed. They got to be careful that they don't make this too similar to special ed or they're going to have a huge referral problem.
Yeah.
And I would say like 16, 18 months ago, I feel like they started bringing people in. And that's where like it was pretty obvious that like the design and the implementation were influenced by special education and 504s, but not a direct overlap, which is really important because I think that it's going to be one of those things that parents need to know the difference between those things. And it can be really hard to navigate that. I know that that's like one of the biggest barriers in special education is just having parents understand like the difference between 504s and special education. And now there's like this additional element of personal reading plans. So, but all in all, I think it's gone much better than I would have guessed.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm really pleased with it.
Okay, so I know that this is a question I get all the time whenever I talk about like the states that have banned certain reading methods. And I realize 3Qing, I've mentioned this before, but 3Qing is like the basic way. It's like when you tell kids to like look at the pictures or guess at the words. Right. And it's banned in, I think at this point, 16 states. I have to confirm, but
yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. And so hopefully all soon, but how do you think this has happened in Wisconsin? Like what got you here?
Well, I mean, for me, I was a career changer for teaching. So when I went back to get my teaching license, I got taught the 3Qing method.
Same.
In grad school as this is how we teach reading. And it was really confusing to me. And then when it came time to take the WeFort is what it's called, but that's the test that you have to pass to get your teacher's license in Wisconsin, or you used to have to pass. It's a very difficult test. It's modeled off of a test in Massachusetts that they've used for a long time, and the pass rate on it is really low. And I noticed that the people that were in the early education program or cohort were passing at a much higher level than the early adolescence and adolescence cohort. And it was because that group was learning through cueing, but they were also mostly learning heavily phonics-based things. And then, so there was a huge disconnect there. And then that is ultimately what I did my master's thesis on, was that disconnect in reading intervention and instruction between the early elementary school and middle school and high school years. So I have lots of thoughts about that. I think that this, all this push has been really good, but it's really interesting to me that, learning this, I still have the notes from the class, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense that this is how we're teaching reading. I don't remember being taught these skills at all. But I just kind of absorbed it. I don't think I ever really used it outside of, instances where I had to, because I never felt like it was really working that well.
Well, you're better than me. I used it.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's gone, but it was interesting to be like at the nexus of it, taught, and then watching everyone fail this test. I passed the test with the lowest score you could possibly get to pass. I remember that. And I was like one of the only people in my cohort to pass the test.
Oh, wow.
But I studied for 2 weeks straight to do it. And it was really hard. And I don't think that test is a requirement anymore in Wisconsin because it was such a barrier to entry for teachers. But I think a lot of the push to change the law did come from the inability for the state to get teachers in the classrooms because of this reading test. And then this reading test went away or got changed, and they realized that what they were teaching in this test was not happening in the schools. And I feel like that big disconnect, which is what I did almost all my research on, was this specific thing. So to see that kind of like change in real time while I was a teacher and then as an administrator was really interesting. I feel the worst for the kids that were kind of like stuck in that time period where they were still kind of trying to use some of this stuff that's been banned in states, and then they got the pandemic, and then there was the whole soul of the story like change movement that happened kind of like during the pandemic and after the pandemic, but there's like a group of kids, and I don't know like the birth years, but there's a group of kids that really kind of got nailed by that transition. Yeah. And I really hope that states, and I think that like buildings acknowledge that kind of bubble, but I don't think that the states and the larger like entities have acknowledged that there is a pretty sizable group of kids between a certain age range that really got kind of like screwed out of good reading instruction. And like, how are we supporting these kids in high school, because those kids are like on the cusp of going to high school right now. I think they're all in like they're like 6th, 7th, 8th graders right now, I would guess. And I would hope that schools, especially high schools, are beefing up their, literacy teams and having.
So you would hope that, or you think that?
I would hope that. I mean, like, I think that high schools are kind of hit or miss with if they have literacy teachers in the building. And sometimes literacy teachers can teach students with IEPs and sometimes they can't. Wisconsin just changed the law very recently, like in the last 6 months, that literacy teachers can now teach students with special education plans, which is huge because that was a massive barrier to entry. when I was teaching. So,
Wow.
that's a very specific Wisconsin thing, but there was for a long time this thought that if you had a reading related IEP goal, you could only get taught by your special education teacher, but special education teachers were getting taught this like 3 cueing system, and they weren't allowed to be in the reg ed environment with the literacy teachers. So you could make the argument that if your kid had a reading need, it was better for them to not have an IEP and have access to a literacy teacher than to have an IEP. And that little like kink just changed in Wisconsin, at least like 6 months ago.
Okay.
That was, again, like what I did my research on. That was like, this is a massive problem. And I talk to middle school parents about it all the time, especially if they were like getting dismissed from special education. And I would be like, it's not, go find the school that has a literacy teacher employed, and tell them when you're enrolling them or when they're scheduling them, that you want them in some sort of literacy class, and be very explicit about it. And yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's good advice. I think in general, what would you say? Do you have any tips? Because parents, okay, so I'll share this information, right, that we're talking about, or they'll hear this in this episode, and parents just kind of feel helpless. Like, okay, so what? Like, some states are doing it right, some states aren't. There's this, like, they say, like, how do I get involved? What's like the entry level of getting involved? Is it like going to a open school board meeting? I know you love to listen to school board meetings.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, because by the time a school board is getting presented with curriculum changes, it's already been, picked for the most part. I mean, you present those changes to a school board, and then the school board takes that information, has obviously read it before, and then they vote. They're not processing that at the school board meeting, which is the open meeting that parents would go to. So I would make the argument that going to a school board meeting is not the way to be involved. I mean, I think I think that it's really hard for people who aren't in schools to pick up on the subtle things that indicate that schools are moving in a direction or moving towards a curriculum change. Because it'll just be like, we allocated money for this consultancy to come in and present these options to us, and then the administrative team will present to the board at like this meeting, and then the board will read it, and then they'll vote, and then the parents think that like the vote meeting is like the meeting they need to go to, like they're going to raise their hand and like in public comment and change something. No, that's like way past. So I would say there's a lot more involvement of like parent and public involvement in curriculum type things now, which is, very controversial in a lot of districts. But I would say like the most important thing that you could do as a parent is just to know what's going on in the classroom, in the sense of what are the skills being taught explicitly in the classroom, and then talking with your teacher about like, how can we reinforce these, but not in the same way that you're teaching it at home. Like I tell parents all the time that like one of my favorite things to do with kids, and I do with my own kids, is help them with like the grocery shopping list, so like they can make the grocery shopping list with you. And it works on like early writing skills.
Do you know this is my favorite thing to recommend too?
Yeah, there's some like executive functioning things. If you're like put them in order of like where they are in the store, and then you always like tell them, if you do this, you can pick something, like we'll get you a donut right at the start or at the end, or you get to pick a candy at the checkout lane. But I like, sometimes it's hard to read what they wrote, but you can say like, we need hot dogs, and they have to like write the hot dog. And then there's the reading element comes back into place when they're in the cart with you, trying to read their own handwriting. And some kids are like right on it. And then some kids don't immediately recognize it. And that process of them trying to figure it out is really good for them learning wise.
Yes.
So I love the grocery list thing. I think it's, it kills two birds with one stone. A lot of people don't bring their kids grocery shopping with them.
Yeah.
I love to do it because I think it makes a very dull thing more fun. And it also, you can like insert little like parts of it into their, into kind of like their real world.
What I think the more real world you can make reading and writing or anything for kids, it makes sense. There's so many kids that are like resistant because it just doesn't, they think it doesn't matter. They're like, I don't care about reading. And you say like, well, you're going to have to learn how to read because it's going to, I love reading and I want you to love reading as much as I do. And it's like, your kid does not care that you love reading. They're only thinking about right now. They're not thinking about becoming an adult and high school like you are. What they need to know, oh, this is going to get me to be able to get candy. Like they need shorter goals.
Yeah. Like I had the kids write out the sign for like a lemonade stand we just did recently. And I think they honestly made more money because they clearly wrote it.
Yeah.
I think it was a good business decision, like a good marketing decision for them to write it. So I think, having, putting like whiteboard signs on your kids' doors and allowing them to like say, like be back later, or like
keep out.
Like my daughter always writes things like, she calls her siblings the brothers, which is one of my favorite things. She'll write like BRUDDERS, like the brothers, please like keep out.
Cute.
And so I do think that like the early writing stuff is easier to organically bring into the like world that you live in at home than early reading skills. I mean, yeah, you could cover your house in like, printed words and things like that. I've seen parents that do that, and I know that was like something that would often get like recommended to parents. They'd be like, oh, like, spend 8 hours like printing out every single word like you're moving, and like putting it like on every single thing. And then people are going to go into your house and think you're like an absolute psychopath. You're like, oh, I'm teaching my kids how to read. No, like you're just, like that's way too much. Like you don't need to do stuff like that.
No, I would rather have your kid like take some Post-its and write the beginning sound and put them on things.
Or like if you go to a museum or an aquarium or a zoo, like having them like try to figure out signs and things like that is important. Even things when people are like, oh, I have them read the signs on the road. Why? Like you really want like a kid to be like, turn off on this exit, and be like, no, we're not. And they're like, turn off on this exit. I'd rather be in like the trenches with my kid learning how to read, not on highway.
Yeah.
And have like, an elephant exhibit where they're like trying to read like what the elephants eat,
Yeah, that's good.
So I think a lot of the like stereotypical things that have always been told parents to do with like learning how to, especially like learning sight words and things like that, I think they just don't fit like the reality. Like no one wants the little like pictures. I like the Post-it thing. The Post-it thing's good. I think that like reading within the structure of like a game is.
Oh, agree. I'm like, you don't need to read books. Like actually, in fact, like drop the books. Just use a whiteboard, write messages to each other, right? We're having spaghetti for breakfast, and see if your kid can decode part of that word and then be like, what? Did I write the word the wrong way? We're not having spaghetti. We're having, and then let them try to write what you're actually having.
Yeah. The grocery list thing works really well. I mean, like a more advanced version of that is taking your kids to someplace like Home Depot, I didn't do that for a really long time because it's very intimidating. But like if you can get your kid like down an aisle with all the little like signs and stuff like that and be like, this is what we need. And you can like ask people in an orange, vest for help. And like you just like stand on the end of the aisle and let them go through and try to like read all the things. First of all, like you're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
But you can like interact with someone. Hopefully that understands their children. And in kind of like a customer service capacity. I think stuff like that is more meaningful than your, like I said, the two examples earlier, or, reading road signs. Like honestly, like reading road signs is, the last thing in the world I want is like my kids like yelling out things when I'm driving, like of signs, like as I'm passing, while a person is telling me where to go too. Like the person's telling me the directions, and then my kids are just blurting out every single sign that they see. No, thank you. I'll just. You guys can learn to read some other time.
This is time to be quiet. Yeah. And also that Home Depot thing seems advanced. Like that would be an advanced task for me to navigate Home Depot. So you're right. That is the advanced version.
That's Home Depot can be a tough one for anything more than like 2 kids, I would say. I don't know that.
And it's a great activity. I feel like that's such a good life skills activity, like kids learning how to ask for help when they need it. I feel like so many kids don't know how to like call someone on the phone, like they're just like missing these skills. They think like, oh, I'll just look it up. I mean, I have been in a store before and I'm like, I don't want to talk to a person. I'm going to look up what aisle this is in on my phone.
Yeah. You can, there's like some honestly, the Home Depot works a lot for like math skills too, and like number recognition, probably more so than reading. But yeah, like I've had to go and get wood for something, and I've taken the kids and been like, this is what I'm making, and I need these. I give each of them something that they have to find. And I just kind of like let them run around and figure it out. And I usually tell them like, don't take it out. Like just go to the place where it is and like ask me if you're right. Because what I used to do is be like, go find it. And then they would like, like I'd have like one kid dragging like a 2x4, and then I'd have like another kid with like, a block sander, and they would just be like dropping stuff all over the floor. So you need to, there's like definitely some strategy to it. But I think that if you can incorporate the reading stuff into your errands, I think it's big. Reading directions in like a recipe is all fine and good, but if the recipe is time bound or requires some kind of fast processing, again, it's like the driving thing. It's like everyone says like, oh, cook with your kid, or like, oh, have their kid read the signs. Like these are situations where if you mess up, there's like a negative consequence. There's really no negative consequence to your kids like bringing you the wrong type of cereal at a grocery store.
That's true.
But like if your kid is like, we need it says like 2 cups of flour, and they put like 3 cups of flour in, you've just like destroyed whatever you were trying to make. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, I try to not do teachable moments in situations where like the downside is like a huge mess to clean up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, that's a great tip. Okay, so speaking of the learning to read age and stage, should we talk about kindergarten redshirting?